detected. Hostile hive detected. Agent down. Agent now.
Specialization supply drop has been taken by the enemy.
Agent down.
Hey everyone, RogueGold here, and today I'm coming back at you with another build video. Today we're going to be taking a look at my conflict build that you've likely seen me use a lot recently in a lot of my background footage. It's a ton of fun, as you saw in the gameplay, is super lethal and very effective for the conflict game mode. We're going to get into that. Just want to say up front very quickly, as I do with a good amount of my build videos when it's not pertaining to new gear per se, that this is not a revolutionary build, right? I did not come up with this. I'm not claiming that I did. These combinations and this stuff has all been around for quite a while, but as I like to do, I get a lot of questions from people about what builds I'm using, if I can link them to a video where it kind of breaks down everything that they need to get on the gear. So I very much like to make these references for people to be able to take a look at so they can kind of put together the same setup and try it out for themselves. So that's the primary goal here. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, and here is the build. As you can see, lots of damage-oriented things that really help me put people down quickly. Also not investing a ton into survivability because of how conflict works with the radar and whatnot, but we'll touch on some of that as we go through here. Let's start with the primary. I have a Carbine 7, which is my favorite high-end AR in the game, and it works really well in this case. So I have AR damage starts at cover and flatline. We are speccing heavily into pulse damage here, which gives you those big amplified damage boosts, and that works really well in conflict because obviously, unless someone is running a dedicated pulse resist build, you're just getting a lot of free damage because it's really easy to line people up in your sights there, and it works really well. And on here, I just have 2 crit chance mods and the linked laser pointer, which we'll talk about again in a moment when we get to the specialization. Just a 20-round mag there. Secondary and pistol, totally up to you. As per usual on most of my builds, I don't really use them much. I used the B a bit more before it got nerfed, but really there's not much use to it now. You could run the TDI card, you could run whatever you want there, totally up to you. Then let's talk about the gear pieces. You'll see I am running 3 and 3, at least for how the base cores of this are rolled. Usually I'll go for a bit more armor and stuff like the DZ and different types of builds that I've run in conflict before, but really the basis of what this build is set up around is the fact that there is no radar in conflict, right? You can play very stealthily, and that's really what this build revolves around, because I still have some armor because there are those cases where you run around a corner and you and somebody else just run into each other because you had no idea you were there, because again, there's no radar. But aside from those cases, I'm going into damage in a lot of other places, including having vigilance on the backpack, which again we'll talk about, but all of this stuff just comes into effect when you can really sit somewhere, no one knows where you are, they run by you, you just aim up and beam them, and they're dead right away, because that's just kind of how conflict plays. Is it the most fun or balanced? No, but that's kind of the reality, so that's kind of what this build is all focused around. Starting off with the mask, we have the Coyote's Mask Exotic. I think this is really strong in conflict because there is never a time where you won't be playing with a group, so this is always going to be affecting everybody on the team, and conflict is very much a team-focused mode where it's very hard to go solo and kind of take on the whole other team unless they're all just very inexperienced in PvP. Usually there is a good amount of team coordination and power that's needed, and this kind of helps you bridge that gap. So of course we have the standard rolls that come on that: weapon damage, crit chance, crit damage with a crit chance mod on there. And I'll show you my crit distribution for my primary gun here. You'll see I have 50 chance and 126 damage. Now, you may have heard me say this in other videos, but when I run the Coyotes mask, I try not to go above 50% crit chance. And that's because when I proc that middle value, which you'll see there between 15 and 25 meters, I'm getting 10% crit chance and 10% crit damage. I don't want to surpass the cap, right? The cap for crit chance is 60, and if I'm above 50% and I proc that middle value, which is where a lot of engagements happen with ARs from 15 to 25 meters, then I'm just wasting crit chance, right? That could be put into crit damage instead when I'm already going to hit the cap. So that's kind of my philosophy there, and I think that comes into play a lot in conflict. You know, there are those close-up engagements, and in that case, I'll have 50% chance and 150 damage, and that's great. But for a lot of the time, I'm going to end up having 60 chance and 135 damage, which is, again, a really nice distribution. And on top of the fact that it is buffing up the entire team, it's just a really great pick for conflict. Moving on to the chest piece, I have the Closer, which is, of course, the named Uzina chest piece that comes with Perfect Spotter, because, again, we're speccing heavily into all that pulse stuff to get a lot of damage there. On here, I have Armor, Crit Damage, Crit Chance, and a Crit Chance mod. One thing I do want to point out is that if you want to go for a bit more damage compared to Armor on the setup, you could swap out this chest piece for a Walker chest piece and use another Walker over here on the gloves instead of the Contractors, and I think that would get you a bit more damage. Again, kind of all of this stuff is tunable. This is just a template that you can follow, so always tune it to your own preferences and playstyles. But specifically there, I think that's one good modification you can make. If you want a bit more damage, you could probably go to Walker. In this case, I am getting a bit more armor because the brand bonus here gives me the 5% total armor. Personally, I prefer that. I think that's nice because you're already getting so much damage from everywhere else on this build that I think the extra little bit you get from Walker isn't quite noticeable, but the armor could save you in those certain circumstances, so that's just why I like to have it there. But again, that is totally up to you. Moving on to the holster, we have the Picaro's holster, which is of course one of the best in slot items around here when you get damage and armor on that. So we have the 10% skill ace from the brand bonus, but of course the main reason we're using it is we get the armor core attribute and the weapon damage regular attribute, which is its named uniqueness. And so essentially, even though it's not rolled as a core, I'm getting 3 blues and 5 reds on this setup, which just contributes to the really great overall distribution this has in conflict. And then of course I have the 12% crit damage on there. Moving on to the backpack, we have one piece of Fenris, of course, to get our 10% AR damage. On here we've got weapon damage, crit chance, crit damage, and a crit damage mod, and vigilance. Now vigilance can sometimes not be the best in like the DZ because you're just getting hit from every angle sometimes for different players or NPCs or whatever it may be, but in conflict, vigilance is a really strong talent. Again, because there's no radar, it's super easy to just go undetected, wait somewhere, and just spring a trap on somebody and take them down before they even have a chance to shoot you. But even if they do, then you still have everywhere else to make up for that damage. The point is, vigilance is going to have a very high uptime because of how stealthily you can go around the mode, and it's just really strong. Nothing else to say. Then for the gloves, we are using the Contractor's gloves to get that damage to armor. So on here we have armor, DTA, and crit damage. Not much else to say. Contractors are super good. Again, if you want that slightly more damage-focused setup, you could swap that in the chest piece to go to Walker, but in this case, I'm using that, and you're getting a very good amount of damage there. And then last up, no surprise, I am using the Fox's Prayer to get the damage to targets out of cover. Again, one of the best in slot items for multiplicative damage in the game, and this is no exception. So we have weapon damage, the damage to targets out of cover, and crit damage on there. Briefly moving on to the skills. On here I have the Defender drone. Again, after the shield got nerfed, a lot of people switched over to this skill, and nothing else to say other than it's going to help out in those gunfights when you need that little bit of extra reduction. You'll see we're getting 14.7% here, and it definitely benefits from when you're running Technician to get that free skill tier, so that is super nice. And then we have the EMP Sticky Bomb. I contest that this is almost more useful in conflict than it is in the DZ because it's, again, there's no radar. It is really easy to get people unsuspectingly, and if you sit around a corner, you pop the EMP, and then they run into it and you stagger them, that's a lot of free damage that you wouldn't otherwise get. Is that kind of cheesy? Yeah, but so is the whole rest of the conflict game mode, so I can't say I feel too bad. One thing I will let you know is that decoys, which again are pretty popular in the DZ because of how they take you off the radar, they're not very useful in conflict at all because, once again, there is no radar. So there's really nothing to be taken away from you. I think your nameplate gets taken away, but honestly, I think decoys are a real waste of a skill slot in conflict, and you'll be much better off running stuff like this or anything else that you find useful. And then last up, we come to the specialization. Obviously, the primary purpose for this is to get the linked laser pointer for our gun to unlock all of those pulse bonuses. Usually I would say that there's an alternative to just run the scanner pulse instead of running this if you want to run something like firewall, but in the case of conflict, if you didn't know, it gets the pulse skills and pretty much anything pulse related gets huge debuffs in conflict game mode as far as their cooldown. I think the scanner pulse has like a base 2-minute cooldown in conflict, which again part of a super old rule set. I really wish they would go and change that stuff at some point in time, but that is not the case for now. So can't really recommend that here, and really the best way you're going to unlock those pulse abilities is by running the technician and getting that linked laser pointer, so that's my recommendation there. Alright everybody, and that is the build. Very much hope you enjoyed, as I said, and as you saw in the gameplay, this thing is a ton of fun, very effective for how Conflict plays, however unbalanced that may be. This is very much tuned for the Conflict playlist and rule set, and it's very fun in that way. If you're trying to get a bit more acclimated for Conflict and prepare for the upcoming rework in Year 5 Season 1 that it's going to receive to its XP and kind of all of those rewards associated with it, this is a great starting build if you want to get in there and just get your toes in the water for how it all feels. I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this setup. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be very appreciated, and be sure to click that subscribe button as well as turning on the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future builds and uploads. And let me know your thoughts on the build, guys. Any praises, feedback, criticism, love it all. Love to hear it. Let me know down below. That's all I've got for today, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.